Welcome, my name is Jisō, and I'm reading Master Dōgen's Shōbōgenzō. And Storm Isha is going wild outside, blowing wheelie bins around. We are on chapter 13. Chapter 13, the transmission of the robe, Den-e. Den-e, surely. Den means transmission and e means robe, so den-e means the transmission of the robe. The content of this chapter is very similar to that of the previous chapter, Keisakudoku. Furthermore, the date recorded at the end of the chapter is the same. But whereas the note at the end of Keisakudoku says preached to the assembly at Kannon-dori Koshi Horinji Temple, the note to this chapter says written at Kannon-dori Kosho Horinji Temple. It thus seems likely that Den-e is the draft of the lecture Master Dōgen was to give on October the 1st, and Keisakudoku is the transcript of the lecture he gave on that day. In other words, having just read 5 parts about the Keisa to you over 5 days, I'm now going to read pretty much the same thing again. And this happens a couple of times in Shōbōgenzō. It happens in chapters 18 and 19, Shin Fuka Toku, later on. So, if a subject's important, it's worth repeating. So here we go, repeating it. The authentic transmission into China of the robe and the Dharma, which are authentically transmitted from Buddha to Buddha, was done only by the founding patriarch of Shaolin Temple. The founding patriarch was the 28th ancestral master after Shakyamuni Buddha. The robe had passed from rightful successor to rightful successor through 28 generations in India, and it was personally and authentically transmitted through 6 generations in China. Although it was transmitted through 33 generations in the Western Heavens and the Eastern lands, the 33rd Patriarch, Zen Master Daikan, received the authentic transmission of this robe and Dharma on Obai in the middle of the night, and he guarded and retained the robe until his death. It is now still deposited at Horinji Temple on Sokai Zan Mountain. Many generations of emperors in succession requested that it be brought into the palace, where they served offerings to it. They guarded the robe as a sacred object. The Tang dynasty emperors Chuso, Shukosu, and Daiso frequently had the robe brought to court and served offerings to it. Both when they requested it and when they sent it back, they would dispatch an imperial emissary and issue an edict. This is the manner in which they honoured the robe. Emperor Daisho once returned the Buddha's robe to Sokai Zan Mountain with the following edict: I now dispatch the great General Ryu Sokai, pacifier of the nation, to receive with courtesy and to deliver the robe. I consider it to be a national treasure. Venerable priests, deposit it in its original temple. Let it be solemnly guarded by monks who have intimately received the fundamental teaching. Never let it fall into neglect. Thus the emperors of several generations each esteemed the robe as an important national treasure. Truly, suffering from virus. Truly, to retain this Buddha's robe in one's country is a superlative great treasure, which surpasses even dominion over the worlds as countless as the sands of the Ganges in a 3,000 great thousand-fold world. We should never compare it with Benka's gem. A gem may be the national seal of state, but how can it become the rare jewel which transmits the Buddha's state? From the Tang dynasty onwards, the monks and laymen who admired and bowed to the Keisa were all, without exception, people of great makings who believed in the Dharma. If not aided by good conduct in the past, how else would we be able to prostrate this body in admiration to the Buddha's robe, which has been directly and authentically transmitted from Buddha to Buddha? Skin, flesh, bones, and marrow that believe in and receive the robe should rejoice. Those that cannot believe in and receive the robe should feel regret, even though the situation is of their doing, that they are not the embryos of Buddhas. Even secular teaching says that to look at a person's behavior is just to look at that person. To have admired and to have bowed now to the Buddha's robe is just to be looking at the Buddha. We should erect hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of stupas and serve offerings to this Buddha robe. In the heavens above and in the ocean's depth, whatever has mind should value the robe. In the human world too, sacred wheel-rolling kings and others who know what is true and know what is superior should value the robe. It is pitiful that the people who became, in generation after generation, the rulers of the land, never knew what an important treasure existed in their own country. Deluded by the teachings of Taoists, many of them abolished the Buddha Dharma. At such times, instead of wearing the kesa, they covered their round heads with Taoist caps. The lectures they listened to were on how to extend one's lifespan and to prolong one's years. There were emperors like this, both during the Tang dynasty and during the Sung dynasty. These fellows were rulers of the nation, but they must have been more vulgar than the common people. They should have quietly reflected that the Buddha's robe had remained and was actually present in their own country. They might even have considered that their country was the Buddha land of the robe. The kesa may surpass even sacred bones, and so on. Wheel-rolling kings have bones, as do lions, human beings, Pratyeka Buddhas, and the like. But wheel-rolling kings do not have the kesa. Lions do not have the kesa. Human beings do not have the kesa. Only Buddhas have the kesa. We should believe this profoundly. Stupid people today often revere bones, but fail to follow the kesa. Few know that they should guard and retain their own kesa. This situation has arisen because few people have ever heard of the importance of the kesa, and even these few have never heard of the authentic transmission of the Buddha Dharma. When we attentively think back to the time when Shakyamuni was in the world, it is little more than 2,000 years. Many national treasures and sacred objects have been transmitted to the present for longer than this. This Buddha Dharma and Buddha robe are recent and new. The benefit of their propagation through the fields and villages, even if there have been 50 propagations, is wonderful. The qualities of those things are obvious, but this Buddha robe can never be the same as those things. Those things are not received in the authentic transmission from rightful successors, but this robe has been received in the authentic transmission from rightful successors. Remember, we attain the truth when listening to a 4-line verse, and we attain the state of truth when listening to a single phrase. Why is it that a 4-line verse and a single phrase can have such mystical effect? Because they are the Buddha Dharma. Now, each robe and all 9 kinds of robe have been received in the authentic transmission from the Buddha Dharma itself. The robe could never be inferior to a 4-line verse and could never be less affected than a single phrase of Dharma. This is why, for more than 2,000 years, all followers of the Buddha, those with the makings of devotional practice and of Dharma practice, have guarded and retained the kesa and regarded it as their body and mind. Those who are ignorant of the right Dharma of the Buddhas do not worship the kesa. Now, such beings as Sakra Devanam Indra and the Dragon King, Anavatapta. Though they are the celestial ruler of Layman and the king of dragons, have guarded and retained the Kesa. Yet people who shave their head, people who call themselves disciples of the Buddha, do not know that they should receive and retain the Kesa. How much less could they know its material, colour, and measurements? How much less could they know the method of wearing it? And how much less could they have seen the dignified conventions for it, even in a dream? The Kesa has been called, since olden times, the clothing that wards off suffering from heat, and the clothing of liberation. In conclusion, its merit is beyond measure. Through the merit of the Kesa, a dragon's scales can be freed from the three kinds of burning pain. When the Buddhas realize the truth, they are always wearing this robe. Truly, although we were born in a remote land in the age of the latter Dharma, if we have the opportunity to choose between what has been transmitted and what has not been transmitted, we should believe in, receive, guard, and retain the robe, whose transmission is authentic and traditional. In what lineage have both the robe and the Dharma of Shakyamuni himself been authentically transmitted, as in our authentic tradition? They exist only in Buddhism. On meeting this robe and Dharma, who could be lax in venerating them and serving offerings to them? Even if each day we have to discard bodies and lives as countless as the sands of the Ganges, we should serve offerings to them. Further, we should vow to meet the robe and humbly to receive it upon the head in every life, in every age. We are the stupid people of a remote quarter, born with 100,000 or so miles of mountains and oceans separating us from the land of the Buddha's birth. Even so, if we hear this right Dharma, if we receive and retain this Kesa even for a single day or a single night, and if we master even a single phrase or a single verse, that will not only be the good fortune to have served offerings to one Buddha or to two Buddhas, it will be the good fortune to have served offerings and paid homage to countless 100,000 kotis of Buddhas. Even the servants are ourselves. Start again. Even if the servants are ourselves, we should respect them, we should love them, and we should value them. We should heartily repay the great benevolence of the ancestral master in transmitting the Dharma. Even animals repay kindness. How could human beings fail to recognize kindness? If we fail to recognize kindness, we will be inferior to animals, more stupid than animals. People other than the ancestral masters who transmit the Buddha's right Dharma have never known the merit of this Buddha robe, even in a dream. How much less could they clarify its material, colour, and measurements? If we long to follow the traces of the Buddhas, we should just long for this transmission. Even after 100,000 myriads of generations, the authentic reception of this authentic transmission will still be just the Buddha Dharma itself. The evidence for this is clear. Even secular teaching says, one does not wear clothing different from the clothing of the past king, and one does not follow laws different from those of the past king. Buddhism is also like that. We should not wear what is different from the Dharma clothing of past Buddhas. If our clothes were different from the Dharma clothing of past Buddhas, what could we wear to practice Buddhism and to serve Buddhas? Without wearing this clothing, it might be difficult to enter the Buddha's order. Thank you for listening.